go. What is happening? Are you okay? Okay, everyone, avert your eyes. Avert your eyes, children. All right. Here we go. Daniel, to remind you of what the spirit days are and some other stuff. So today. Okay. Who else is doing twin? Anybody? Who? Oh, right, yeah. I got her email. I got this yesterday. Because we want to see you as a baby. Okay. All right. So when you see oh, actually, you don't see Daniel because he's on a blue day. There we go. Don't see him. No, not gonna. All right. So, yeah, recording this. This is good. So actually, this class has worked out pretty well to do the recording because some I go a little bit fast because. So it's like I go a little slower, so I'm like I have to make sure I note what I need to make sure to cover so that nothing gets left out. And in here it's fine. I'm wearing the shield. I already told you about that on Monday, right? But I've got like a school-approved shield, which is a little bit closer to my face, so I've got a little bit more echo chamber. But I'm gonna have to do something about the plasticky thing that's against my forehead because I don't want to sweat like a pig. So I got my little it's a thing in there. So anyway, yeah, I mean, you guys look pretty funky. You got like all your blacks and grays and hospital and mustaches ones over there. Yeah, it's like do the screen here. No, this just looks stupid. I'm going to see if I can figure out something. Really? Yeah. Okay. Fine. It fits the personality character. Woo, woohoo! All right. So, piece of information. This is starting to become a little bit more official. As we go through, obviously, everything's a little bit different because, I don't see you except for every other day, and I only see you like for half of the time that I would normally do that, which kind of messes up. Sometimes it fits more nicely. This unit, I normally don't have as much video, but I did have a video, and we clarified that, right? Some of you guys have watched it already. I normally don't do the whole thing. Evan, because I know you know the answer, is all of that video going to be on the test? What, to the extent that any of that is on the test, how is that possible? What is on the test? What's on the test? Just the notes, yeah, what we do in class. For those of you guys who have seen it, actually, I know you have. Anybody else seen part of it so far? Okay. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, this is maybe related somehow. Anyway, got the same name. To the extent that there are things that we have covered that show up in the video, and there will be things, that's on the test. But it elaborates it more. So actually, it's good because with history, more is better in the sense that you know more, and if you're ever writing an essay on that topic, you can take that more and elaborate and create more detail and so forth. Okay, honestly, sometimes and I'll do that the same with you guys. For an essay topic, in fact, over the years, the first essay topic that we have for an IB essay in class is Spanish-American War and early American imperialism. And I give the question ahead of time. And so inevitably, I'll have students who write about that, and they'll do additional research. I mean, they really will. They'll do additional research because they're they just want to know everything that they can possibly because they're thinking, over a 40, 45-minute stretch, they're never going to have enough to write about. In fact, you've got plenty enough to write about based on what we've done in here. But nevertheless, that's fine. So now you guys have some additional stuff to write about having watched that video. And I had to explain this to one of the students yesterday because they're like, you can't show a 2-hour video. You only have us for 45 minutes for one day. But for 3 days, I have you for 2 hours and 15 minutes. So maybe I should have the the director's cut version of the whatever. So Anyway, in future, next week, what do you guys have in here as far as an assessment? Civics test, yeah, civics test. And that's the only like in-class like test or quiz and so forth that we're doing. And so, but I'm looking and going, okay, we're going to wrap up this unit because we're going to need to move on to the next unit. And this happens sometimes, and especially I would say this year just because of like all the weird things. So, my intention was to have 3 reading quizzes. We've already had one on chapter 27. And I think this mostly kind of got shot a little bit because we threw in the civics exam. If we didn't have the civics exam, I'd be having you guys do chapter 28. I think I'm going to drop chapter 28 as a quiz. And I think we'll go right on to the next quiz. The last quiz for this unit will be the Zen chapter. And I'll give you the link for that, and I'll give you the study guide material for that, okay? Both of those would have been 10-point quizzes, so the Zen one, a 10-point quiz. And actually, that one's a really good chapter because it gives you some really good examples of where the United States is involved in other parts of the world besides just from the Spanish-American War, okay? So when you write an essay about American imperialism, you're not just going to be talking about, you know, the Spanish-American War, okay? So we'll give you some, we'll give you, that'll probably, oh, good grief, yeah, let's see, next week is the civics exam, and then the week after that is break, yeah. So the quiz will be like on the week after break, and then we'll look to try and wrap it up maybe the following week on this unit, and then, anybody know, what's the next unit? Oh, something big.
World War I.
Exactly, yeah. They called it the Great War. Then other people optimistically called it the war to end all wars. Yay! And then after the Second World War came along, it's like, I guess we'll call it World War I. I mean, what do we call the next big war? World War III, hashtag. Yeah, you know, it's like the next big war in, hopefully not in your lives. It's like, what could make 2020 even more messed up? Oh, yeah, well, there we go. Yeah. Growth mindset. Yeah, here we go. What more bad can happen? Sure. Oh, and also, by the way, I'm still meeting, I'm actually still waiting for like some seniors to revise or get their IAs into me and to meet with them. So it's taking a little bit of time. But trust me, you guys, I will, as soon as those guys are done, or as soon as I get like time in my afternoon schedule, we'll be plugging you guys in for meetings to come up with question for your research. Okay, I think everybody in here has sent me that, so that's good. And so it's basically, you know, my goal is to have that done, wrapped up like within 15, 20 minutes in a face-to-face conversation to really hone in on what it is that you have discovered and you're interested in, and the research is there, and we'll come up with a workable question and then go from there. And most of the time, that question works out for you as you go through the research. Sometimes we tweak it a bit, yeah, that'll, at earliest, next week we'll have those meetings. If not, then after the break. And if I have to, I don't want to, if I have to bump out the due date, I might later. I'm trying to get that due date, everything wrapped up before Christmas, because I know in some of your classes you're going to have like finals in those weeks right afterwards. So yeah, we're trying to manage that all. They're putting together, Miss Holiday's putting together the calendar of like your IB due dates and so forth. And the goal is to have them not all clump up at once. But I can tell, like right now, they're doing the senior one. It's like, whoa, there's a lot of dates. You know, there's only one history date. Those guys have to have their final version done by right before Christmas. Okay? But in the other classes, like IA, this and this and this and this, and I'm thinking, oh, next year you guys are going to be really appreciative of the fact that your history IA done. Done. Right? For your other classes, you'll still have plenty of things to do. Okay? Yay. So anyway, we're keeping all those things in mind to keep things in balance. Okay, any questions? Right? All right, let's get to it. Let me see, let me just check and see by way of Treaty of Paris. Okay, so, oh, okay. Did we talk about William Jennings Bryan? Okay, so we've got the war is over, Spanish-American War. Woohoo, the United States won. But, you know, sometimes you get a big victory and it's like, oh, now what? Now what? Now we have responsibility over Cuba. But, did we get to the Platt Amendment? Okay, so we got the Platt Amendment in there. Okay, well, let me make sure I get on the right page here. Okay. So we got the Platt Amendment in basically saying that we're going to let Cuba be in control, but make sure you have this in your notes. We insisted that the Cuban Constitution contain the provisions of the Platt Amendment. We wanted to have it in writing in their governing document that they would allow us to intervene militarily in cases of, one, like if they're being invaded or something, like their security was in danger, because we don't want Europeans like the Germans to take over Cuba. But the other one is pretty broad. We have the right to intervene if if we think it's going to impact our national security. You got that? It's kind of like, I mean, why would Cuba agree to that? Well, let me see. What was actually present in Cuba at the time that they were like kind of forced to put that in their constitution? The United States military. Yes. So I mean, we made it quite clear. Eventually, and that's actually not going to. That provision's not going to be in there forever. Eventually, we will remove that provision. We're not going to state, yeah, we can intervene anytime we want. But the other part is very important. That will continue, and it still continues today. Garen, did we talk about that last time? What is in place in Cuba that belongs to the United States that we agreed to with Cuba? Military base. What name do we have for that? I gave you that one? I want to make sure we have that spelled out for you. I think, yes, and it is. It's on the handout that I gave you. The one-page handout. If you look right there, it's very helpful to have that with you, because Guantanamo is very difficult to remember how to spell. Guantanamo. And don't just go Gitmo. I mean, that's what the Marines call it, who serve there. Guantanamo Bay. You see it? There it is. You guys? Guantanamo. Not Guam. Guantanamo Bay. And we did talk about that last time, why the United States still insists, even during Barack Obama, who's like, hey, we're going to open up relations with the Cuban exchange ambassadors, and yet we still want to maintain our military base there. And as long as we want it, even though the Cubans don't want us to have it there, that was part of the agreement. We will maintain it. And they're not going to try foolishly to try and kick us out. What was the reason? I'm trying to check just to see if we talked about it. Because it's not necessarily an obvious reason why we would have a military base there. I don't think we talked about it, did we? All right, write this down, because this is sort of like a modern issue. Does the United States deal with terrorists? Yeah. Yes. What do we do with terrorists when we find them in different parts of the world? Yeah, I mean, we try and take them out, right? And so after 9/11, we captured a whole bunch of people who were suspected terrorists, right? They were operating in the terror camps of Al-Qaeda in places like Afghanistan. So we swooped them up. What did we do with them? We took many of them to Guantanamo Bay. Now, it's always an interesting question, because it's like, what did we do with them? Do we have enough evidence to put them in front of a jury in the United States of America and charge them with criminal behavior? No. You know what it takes to actually charge somebody with criminal behavior and then get a resulting verdict of guilty so you can put them into prison? Proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So what kind of evidence and so forth were we able to gather when we swooped in and got those guys in their various different places in the world? Not enough. Yeah, and yet we still have concern about what would happen. Some of them were like, well, maybe the concern's not that much, and we might send them home. During the time of President Bush and Obama, we sent some of those guys home to their home countries, and some of those governments were like, yeah, we'll keep an eye on them. Well, some of those guys were released or got out, and some of them went back into doing terror activities again. So then we got this question is like, what do we do with the remaining people at Guantanamo Bay? There's still some. There's not as many. A lot of them have been, removed, but there's still some. We don't feel comfortable enough taking them to the United States. Oh, do you understand this? If you're a United States person, I don't want you to say citizen, if you're just in the United States, do you have constitutional rights? Can the government just swoop you up and put you in confinement with no charges? Now, there is an exception. We'll see it pop up twice in history. Once we covered it in the 9th grade. President Lincoln, during the Civil War, was like, I don't trust you guys. You're Southern sympathizers, and I think you're going to wreck the Union's cause. Swooped up those guys and put them in confinement. Right? National security reasons, and they're like, hey, word of habeas corpus, you can't do this. And Lincoln's like, pound sand. We'll release you after the war's over. And you guys know this is going to come up this year. What was the other time in U.S. history? Some of you guys know this. It occurred in World War II. President Roosevelt, with the support of lots of people in this country, including Congress and the Supreme Court, they're like, let's swoop these people up. We see that they're a national security danger. Japanese Americans, yeah. And afterwards, we're like, yeah, maybe not so much of a security danger as we thought, but nevertheless, they were held in confinement in places like Minidoka, Idaho, in camps. It was like nicer camps than existed in some parts of the world at that time, but nevertheless, confinement. And it was national security, okay? So if we were to try and put suspected terrorists under trial in the United States of America, or we took them physically to the United States of America, just relocated them, they would have rights. People have rights. As soon as they step foot on U.S. soil, they've got rights. And we would have to go through the whole process with them. And, if you put them in front of a jury, you don't have enough evidence, what's the verdict going to be? Not guilty. And what can you do with somebody who's not guilty? You got to let them go. So that's why this base right there, Guantanamo Bay, it's not U.S. soil. It's Cuban soil. But it's U.S. military confinement. And I think even that message got through to President Obama, and he's like, I don't want to be the one who gets blamed for activities of those last remaining, what would potentially be called hardcore terrorists, but you just don't have enough evidence stacked up against you. You see that, how that plays out? It's kind of an interesting little nuance there. Other ones, like if they're terrorists that are being held by, the Saudis or, some Arab country and so forth, that's their business. And they do all kinds of various different things. You talk about enhanced interrogation techniques. Yow. Yeah, in those countries, you're going to get all kinds of stuff like that going on. And then it's like, then they hand them over to the United States of America after they've presumably gotten accurate information out of them as to what was going on. So anyway, that's an interesting question relative to that. Okay, just kind of an interesting little nuance relating to Guantanamo Bay. Okay, did the treaty pass the Senate? Yes. Okay, and William Jennings Bryan supported it because basically he's like, let's go for independence for the Philippines eventually. Let's get the treaty done now. Let's go for the independence for the Philippines eventually, and it will. It's going to take a couple of wars, and we'll have to take the Philippines back from Japan during World War II, because Japan's going to take it over in 1941, and we won't get it back and make it free again until shortly after World War II. Okay? All right, so the Platt Amendment. We got John Hay. Do you have him in your notes yet? No? Okay. All right, so this is all new. This is sort of a wrap-up, and I think I've quoted him before. This is sort of like, so what was the Spanish-American War like for the United States of America? Well, according to the Secretary of State, our top foreign policy person, it was a splendid little war. War? Splendid? Well, because we won. Yeah, it was splendid in the aspect that we won, and that it was fairly quick, right, 113 days, and we didn't have too many military casualties. Right? In the Navy, I think we had practically none. In the Army, we had some in Cuba, but not lots. Most of the harm that came to our military forces was from what? Disease, yes. Things like malaria and typhoid and yellow fever and so forth. So here we go. Woohoo! United States of America. Even though we're a little nervous that, what does this mean to be an imperialist? Write this down. There were other countries that were quite nervous that the United States had taken a bigger step to getting involved in activities over in the Philippines, as well as, again, as it turns out, in the Americas. And it wasn't the first time the United States got involved in activities in the Americas. The countries that were a little bit more nervous about the United States maybe busting up and getting involved in their affairs, Latin American countries. Okay? Latin American countries, especially. Figure this one out. Which countries do you suppose the United States actually, of our history, intervened more in? I'll give you two choices. Central American countries, including the Caribbean, or South American countries? Which do you suppose the United States intervened more? Now, raise your hand if you think Central America. Raise your hand if you think South America. Why would you say, Austin, why did you say South America? Bigger landmass, so you're like, well, there's more landmass, so potentially, maybe it's a bigger deal. Why would you say, Denton, you had your hand up, didn't you, for Central America? Why would you say Central America? It's closer. That's an interesting point. I would say if you look at it fairly closely, I think the evidence tends to support a little bit more on the proximity thing, a little bit closer. So when you look through some of these examples, you're going to see them pop up in both places in the late 1800s, in the early 1900s, and also throughout the Cold War. Yes, they are. Panama. Yeah. Yeah, as this unit, we'll see, there's going to be a canal cut through Panama. Ho, ho, ho. Who built that? Teddy Roosevelt. That's coming up, actually. I don't know if we'll get quite to that today, but we will. If not, we'll get it into the next time. Okay? The other thing that was very important coming out of it, and you must put this in your notes, we've already talked about the United States military experience in the Spanish-American War. Navy, they can feel like, yeah, we were ready. We got tested. It worked out very well for us. What about the whole Army thing? Disjointed, wasn't it? Write this down. I mean, clearly, people looking at the United States military effort when it came to the Army, they're like, this didn't quite work out as well. When you leave all of your horses in Florida and all of your cavalry units and go across the water with no horses, that's poor organization. Okay? So here's a couple things the United States did after that, and it's going to help. One, we established a war college. Okay? Within the military, a war college. Basically, so that people think ahead of time. They plan ahead of time. They figure out it isn't just getting out there and pointing guns and shooting people. Some of the most important parts of military preparation for battle is the preparation for battle, is getting the stuff there, getting all those things organized. Because do you know exactly where war is going to pop up, under what circumstances? You don't. So put this down. The United States military, beginning after the Spanish-American War, is going to start doing a much better job planning for eventual wars. I mean, if you were a part of the United States military today, in the higher levels, like let's say Secretary of Defense, I mean, they've got pages upon pages of plans in the event of a war popping out. I mean, seriously, look at that. Look at all those countries there. How many of those countries potentially could have a war? Either the country is going to be a problem, or maybe there's a terror group, or something's going to be happening in that country. A lot of them. So the United States has all these plans in place of what we need to do. In fact, sometimes it's even like we have to fight 2 wars at the same time. I don't know, in your lifetime, we fought in 2 different places at the same time. Which 2 parts of the world did we fight at the same time? They're not too far away from each other. Afghanistan? No, not Vietnam. That's going to be quite a bit before your time. Iraq. Yeah. So we were still involved. We're not as involved there now, but Afghanistan, we still got plenty of troops over there. So war college is going to be very important. A general staff for the military, a general staff. It's basically like, okay, we're in a big imperial country now. We can't just sort of stand down and get rid of our army and go, oh, well, the Native Americans are taken care of, and we're not going to have another civil war, so if any war comes up, we'll just throw it all together at the moment. No. We want to have a general staff, a war college, preparation in case something comes up. Okay? When World War I does come up, are we going to have enough soldiers in our military? No, we won't. We're going to need a lot more. We're going to have a draft, and we're going to take volunteers. But what we do have in place are those planning components, the upper staff and so forth. Does that make sense? Okay. And that actually is going to help, because will we be on the winning side in World War I? Woo-hoo, yes. It's going to take us a while to get all our stuff over there, but we will do it. World War II? Yes. In fact, the best general that we have in the United States military during World War II, President Roosevelt's like, I'm not going to give you command of an army fighting over in Europe or elsewhere. I need you back here in the United States to manage 2 major war efforts, one in the Pacific and one in Europe. George C. Marshall, one of the great Americans, is going to be that general in charge of managing that. Okay? All right. Meanwhile, in the Philippines, write this down. Meanwhile, in the Philippines, you could see this coming. You could see this coming. I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you. In fact, it was fascinating because we were talking yesterday with Kim, and she's like, yeah, because she's from like the Philippines. She's got family in the Philippines and so forth, and she's visited there, and she's seen various different things like, KKK and symbols of swastikas, and you're like, what the heck is going on there? Let me explain. First, okay, did the United States hand over control of the Philippines to Emilio Aguinaldo and the other Philippine independence leaders? No. We're like, we're going to take it ourselves. Because, we are the more civilized country and we can help you and so forth. We'll do a better job than the Spanish. And actually, in fairness, we end up doing a better job than the Spanish. But nevertheless, the Philippine insurrection continues. And a lot of people are going to die, mostly Filipinos. Write this down. Over the next 3 years, there will be an independence fight, an insurgency, led by Aguinaldo and Filipinos who are trying very desperately to get independence now from the United States. The United States military will go in there and crush it. It will be crushed. Aguinaldo ultimately is going to be captured. We're going to defeat the Filipinos. And then we're going to be like, okay, now that I've defeated you, let me lay before you all the benefits of United States civilization and governmental support. You ready? Because I'm going to go through the details here. And let's see if this is going to change the mind of Filipinos and they can be happy being part of the United States empire. Here's some things they do. Trade. We want to help the Philippines be in a better position for trade. So simple things like, it's not simple, it's going to take some money, like improving their harbors so that ships can come in and ships can come out and they can unload and things like that. Now, of course, some people will go, well, yeah, that helps the Americans. Yeah, okay. Well, there's some other things that help the Filipinos too. Roads, improved roads and railway links. You put that down, so we spend a lot of money on that. Thank you, America, for improved roads. Sanitation systems like sewers and so forth. Put a fair amount of money into that so that the lives of the people living in the Philippines are better. All kinds of various different health infrastructure and apparatus. We're going to be investing into that. Yay, my gosh, everything. Yeah, we're doing pretty good at that. Education. We're like good imperialists. Hello. Educational systems so that people can learn. Doesn't this sound like it's very, very convincing? And a number of Filipinos are going to be, yeah, it's not so bad being part of the American empire. But generally, will the Filipinos still want their independence? Yes, they will. And will they eventually get it? Yes, they're going to be pressing for it. Will there be another major insurrection? No. How will the Filipinos, when they ultimately gain independence, look back on that insurrection? Positively or negatively? Positively. This is an image I picked up off the internet. Positive reflection looking back on the independence movement. And you see some interesting images here, right? So you have a dark, oh, by the way, let me just point out one thing, and you're going to see this in the Zen book too. It was really hard for the American military to figure out who the enemy was. Write this down. In the insurrection, it was very much a guerrilla fight. Who is the enemy? Remember the American Revolution? Sometimes it was hard for the British to look and figure out who the enemy was. Because we didn't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they're like walking into town, they're like, I don't know, who's that guy standing behind a tree? Oh, he's pointing a gun at me. Darn it. Who is the enemy? Well, in the Philippines, you have lots and lots of Filipinos, and the Americans are like trying to figure out who the ones are against them, and sometimes they line up and shoot them, and most of the times they're just sort of like blend into this. How do you deal with that? What do you do if the United States military, you can't tell who the enemy is? One of the orders was anything above 10. What? Because, if you're 10 years old or so forth, I suppose, ultimately, when the Americans are walking out of town, you could point a gun at their back, boom, take them out. Now, is that going to help win the hearts and minds of the Philippines? Not necessarily, and there'll still be some remembrance of that, but keep an eye on that one, because later on, when we do get to the Vietnam War in the 1960s, early 70s, the United States military is going to face some of the same challenges. We're going to try and win over the hearts and minds of the Vietnamese people. And yet we can't really tell which of the Vietnamese people are trying to kill us. So sometimes we'll have like a U.S. military group go into a village, and just like line up everybody and start killing them, which we're not supposed to do. We're the good guys. That's not okay. And in fact, the guy who was involved in that will end up being prosecuted in the military. Yeah. So, but those are challenges with guerrilla warfare. Who is the enemy? And do girls fight? Is it just boys? Right? Would you join a resistance movement? Would you? The person who joins it is the one that shakes their head and says, I wouldn't do anything. Just turn your back. Yeah, I've got a great, one of the IAs is, one of the students is doing, is about women resistance in World War II. Oh my gosh. Yeah, those German officers didn't see it coming because the women approach them like, oh, and then take them out and they have a little conversation, and then they're dead. Whoa! Because those men let their guard down. So anyway, yeah, women can play a very, very critical role in an insurrection movement as well. Okay? All right. KKK. In America, KKK is Ku Klux Klan. That has a very strong message there. Is that what's going on here? No. This is a pro-Philippine organization, pro-independence organization. You see the star? That part is actually very important because if you come over here, look at the flag ultimately adopted by the Philippines, you see the same thing. When the Philippines gets its independence, it adopts that symbol. You don't see KKK on there, but those are the initials of, and I'm not even exactly sure what the name of the organization is, but it's a Philippine independence organization. Who knew? I mean, good grief, we got 26 letters of the alphabet, and you put them in various different combinations of 3, and it turns out in the Philippines, it's like, woohoo! America's like, you know, terrible images and so forth. It's like the swastika. If you're in Japan and you're like trying to find a Buddhist temple, you look on a map and you're like, oh my gosh, there it is, a swastika. Does that mean that's like a neo-Nazi gathering point? No! It's a different symbol. Yeah, it's like symbols. It's like you take a cross and you bend it at 4 corners. It means something different in Europe, and I would say the United States. Okay, I don't think there's too many neutral associations with the swastika in the United States. But in East Asia, it's cool, you know? So just know that when you go into various different places. If you go traveling around the world, because like once it's safe again, hopefully it will be, to travel around the world, just do some research ahead of time so you don't do something stupid that will offend people. And you're like, well, that's not offensive in my country, as they've got their foot on your face because you have seriously offended them. Yeah, do your research, okay? KKK is okay in Philippines, not in most parts of the actually all parts of the United States, I would say. Yeah. Okay. Next, we're doing good. Perfect. All right. Meanwhile, in China, okay, we're going to talk about China some more here. And actually, we're going to back it up a little bit. We did talk about China leading up to the Russo-Japanese War, 1904. Russia versus Japan taking over parts of what had been under the control of China. All right, let's back it up a little bit more and give you a little bit more information, particularly how it relates to the United States and China. You ready? The United States was looking over to China and observing that, wow, China is having a hard time. Here we go. Let's take a look. We got another cartoon up here. We've seen one similar to this. The other one was like what, the Chinese dragon being defeated and taken over by various animal representations of other countries. In this one now we have, here's the China person very upset in the background as his China, I don't know, it's like a China pizza. It's like, what the heck? Anyway, is all being carved up. Write it down. China, as we know, is weak and is being basically carved up by outside powers. Let's see if you can figure out which one. Who is this lady with a crown on? What country do you suppose that represents? It is England. It's Queen Victoria. Okay? And then here we have the German Kaiser. You can tell by the little pointy thing because that's part of their uniforms. It made sense, you know, in the days when you're like on a horse and you're trying to prevent somebody from having, no, you don't go like that. Nice try. You're like, that's my defense. That's my attack thing. I'm going to point my head down and attack him with my, no, it's actually to help, it's to help deflect like swords that are coming across the top of your head. You know, because if you have a nice flat top on the thing, then the sword can come down and crack your skull in two, like a nut. But this one, it sort of deflects it. But that's part of their uniform. They'll keep that, the officers will at least, as part of their uniform into like the 20th century, even though it's like, really? Are you going to get into like armed combat with somebody on a horse? No. But it's a stylistic thing. So anyway, Germans, and I think we got Italians, French, and Japanese here. And this slide right here is very, very helpful. Take a look at this. Because this tells you, this shows you, by 1900, now this is before the Russo-Japanese War, by 1900, I'm going to take you through this, by 1900, which outside countries had gained advantage and sometimes direct control, sometimes sort of like, quasi-control over different parts of China. Let's start up here in the north. This is the area that had come under the control of the Russians, okay, including Manchuria. Are they going to hang on to that by 1905? No, they're going to lose that to the Japanese. Let's look at the Japanese. Purple, at this point, they've got an area down in southeast China, and they are interested in taking more, and they will. I mean, if we look at this map, say in the 1930s, we're going to see Japanese control all over the place. It is not good for the Chinese, all right? The French, if you look down here in the south part, you got the French, and actually, if this were colored in, the French have direct control over Southeast Asia, what is called French Indochina, the countries today known as Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. Okay? So they got a little bit more control just north of that into China. The British have a lot, green. They got direct control over some key port cities because the British are all about that trade aspect and getting their stuff in. So Hong Kong, I mean, they've got that. They're going to have that all the way to 1997. Yeah. And along the river, along the main rivers, for example, they'll have some control over that. And then north of their territories in India, they've got some influence there. So really, I mean, the Chinese don't have as much influence over much of their own areas. The Germans, it's hard to tell because those are two different reds. The Germans have some influence and so forth right in here. So they're jumping in there as well. And the Portuguese have some there. What about the United States? Write this down. Did the United States have direct control or influence over any territories in China? No. So here's what we advocate. The open door policy. Okay? Well, it's good for U.S. businesses. Okay? This is like particularly like right after China was defeated by Japan in the Sino-Japanese War, 1894 to 1895. This was the one where that gave Japan a lot of control over like Korea and other parts. And it's sort of like the beginning of Japan's growth of control over China. Okay? So after that, the United States was like, oh, we can see China is starting to like be taken over by all these countries. And you know how that works. If European countries are taking over, Japanese taking over parts of China, does the United States have the same access to those markets? No. Does the United States want access to Chinese markets? Yes. What is the United States going to try and do to maintain or expand access to Chinese markets? Float the idea called the open door policy. I will explain. The United States wants all of China, if it can have it, to be open to trade from whatever country wants to trade with them. Make sure you have that written down. That's our goal for any country. And of course, for any country, we're thinking primarily of what country? For us, exactly. Exactly. So now we're trying to persuade all those other countries that have various degrees of control of China, can you let us in too? And we're like, please, can I? I mean, it's like somebody comes up to you while you're eating lunch, and they're like, can I join you for lunch? And you're like, that sounds innocent. And then, of course, their next thing is, can I join you in eating your lunch? And you're like, So, I mean, put this down. Pretty much all the countries say, fine, write this down. Most of the countries like Britain and Germany and France and Japan are like, sure, fine, America, yeah, whatever, you can bring your trading in here. Russia was the one that said no. And their answer was mostly related to Manchuria. They're like, come on, whatever. That's practically part of Russia anyway. It's like these other people have like overseas aspects in China, but that's really ours. So Russia sort of said no. Okay? But, anyway, we're trying. We're trying to get in there. All right? Next piece of the story. The Chinese people, many of them, they're so fed up with all of these Europeans coming in, and the Japanese, and now the Americans. Like, everyone just wants to take over. And write this down. By the end of the 1800s, it doesn't look like the Chinese government is doing anything about it. No, and seriously, write that down. It doesn't look like the Chinese government's doing anything about it. Well, there's a good reason why the Chinese government doesn't seem to be looking like they're doing anything about it. Because what can they do about it? What things have they tried previously? Did they try military efforts previously? Yeah, how'd that go? It was a disaster. So literally, write this down. This is the Boxer Rebellion, 1897 to 1901. The Boxer Rebellion of 1897 to 1901. It is a fight in China, and it's carried out by super patriotic Chinese martial artists. Yes way. Yeah, no, it is actually very cool, because they're looking around going, our government sucks. We need to do this for China. And they believe in the superiority of Chinese culture and values, and particularly associated with the martial arts. So if you're wearing your Chinese martial art thing, and it's like, some of you guys are like, martial arts, that's really cool. It's good exercise, it's good fighting, and so forth. There's also a spiritual component to it that's very much located within the Chinese thing. Now here is the fallacy. These martial artists, who the outsiders called boxers, because it looks like, they're pugilists, they're boxing like, a European would, but, it's martial arts, East Asian. Anyway, these boxers, they feel as though their outfits will protect them from European bullets. Because European bullets are inferior spiritually, and their outfits are superior spiritually. Well, you know how that's going to work out. Okay? The boxers rise up. They rise up beginning in 1897, and they attack any European or outside influence where it is. Sucks for missionaries, because those guys are over there trying to convert the population to Christianity and so forth, and so the missionaries aren't in good way. What do you suppose, like business interests and other interests from Europe and Japan and so forth, how they respond to it? Not very nice to the Chinese. Write it down. They form a multinational military force and go in and crush the boxers. So here you've got like, which is barbarism and which is civilization, right? Here you got the Chinese boxers going after the Europeans, could be a missionary, and then with equal brutal repression, the boxers are put down, and most of them executed as a result, or many of them executed as a result. And, write this down, and after the fight, the winners charge the Chinese government with paying for the whole thing. Of course, the Chinese government's like, we didn't support this. Too bad. It happened in China. They have to pay $333 million to the winners. Now, here's a nice thing. The United States, our portion was $24.5 million. We had $24.5 million coming to us. We set aside most of that, about 18 million of that, so that Chinese students could come to America, to our colleges, and learn and study. Isn't that nice? It was nice. But anyway, that is the Boxer Rebellion. Next time, we will go to the election of 1900, where a Republican candidate on the ballot is reelected for another 4 years. And then he's killed in the first months of his second term. Not that anything like that is going to happen in America, but that's what happened back then.